you talk about like comments and stuff. And one thing that can bother me is when people say, who cares about in player interviews? They just say they get asked the same crap all the time and they say the same crap every time. And they get asked a lot of the same stuff a lot of the time. That's definitely true. But the good interviews are not like the ones you're seeing generally, are not the ones you're seeing on MSG after the game. The good interviews are done away from a scrum. The good interviews present themselves because of something that you learn just in a conversation with somebody who's behind the scenes, who then you say, oh, hey, can I actually talk to you about that? For example, I'm chatting on, what day is it? It's Wednesday. So Monday, before they played in Houston, I'm talking to Donte DiVincenzo before the game. And Donte is just like a huge hoops head, just loves watching ball. And so he and I just talk basketball. Like any two people who are NBA fans would talk basketball, we're just talking about around the league stuff. Now I was talking and I mentioned something about just kind of how consistent his jump shot has been, even as we're talking about shooting in general. And I mentioned something about how consistent his jump shot has been, even as defenses have started to just swarm him so much more now, because they're just like trying to deny him at half court. And he was like, yeah, I honestly, like, playing with Steph totally changed that for me. And he said the one thing from playing with Steph that was so interesting is like, it really got to me that with Steph, it's all about angling his shoulders. And I cut Donte off. And I was like, dude, I don't know where you're going with this, but it's going to be so interesting. Can I turn my recorder on right now? Because I feel like this would be awesome to write. And he was like, yeah, sure. So I just took out my recorder and I turned on my recorder. And we had a whole conversation about how his jump shooting fundamentals kind of changed playing with Steph, where he concentrates so much more now. He cares so much less about his lower body than he does on where his shoulders are angled when he's shooting. And it's changed the way he shoots. You notice he very, very rarely now misses right or left. And that's where the conversation started. And that was not intended to be an interview. It just kind of naturally happened. And sometimes that's the way it goes, but it's because Donte and I have this sort of relationship where we just like kind of talk ball. Like I love covering people who love basketball because I love basketball. And it's so much fun to be able to talk to people who know the game at so much higher of a level than I ever will. You learn so much. Whether that's, certain players who know the game at an insane level, coaches, execs, whatever, you just so many opportunities to learn. And so I'll just talk, ball with Donte, and all of a sudden that comes up. And now at some point I'll have a story on kind of how playing with Stephen Curry led to this really subtle change. And I'll probably angle it around when they play Golden State in a month, but like how Stephen Curry led to these really subtle changes for DiVincenzo, and now DiVincenzo is having the best shooting season of his career. Not just best shooting season of his career. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the league, period, from everywhere on every kind of shot. And that kind of stuff comes out of just casual conversations. Sometimes it just comes up when I wasn't intending to write that story, but sometimes it just pops up, and your antenna always kind of has to be there. And comes back to what I was saying at the start, which is if I just write what I think is interesting, that also makes it easier to identify what's a story and what's not, because you train yourself to be like when Donte says that, I was like, damn, that's so interesting. And then as soon as I think, wow, that's so interesting, as soon as it gets me, like, then I get this little rush. It's like a drug. I get this little rush. I'm like, oh, story, give it to me.
That's awesome.
And I'm like, dude, can I turn on my recorder? Like, I'd love to write this. This is so interesting. And usually with that kind of stuff, players are going to be like, yeah, sure. Especially if it's someone you have a relationship, they're going to be like almost always they're going to be like, yeah, sure. Because I think, and I can only speak for me with this, I think one advantage that I have is that I'm like really, really, really obsessed with the game. I love basketball so much. And I think that tends to come through because it's very genuine for me when I talk with people. And so when people start telling me things that I think are really interesting about the game, and I'm like, oh my God, can I write this? This is so interesting. I think almost like people sometimes feed off of my enthusiasm for it. You know what I mean? And they get enthused about it too. And I think that helps me. It's not an intentional thing, but it's just like, I think when somebody is really passionate about something, it can rub off on people around them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and stuff like that is so, like, we've had two big conversations this year on this pod about DiVincenzo. The first one was after they signed them, and XJ pretty prophetically, honestly, in hindsight, was like, I'm worried that they view DiVincenzo as a Quickly replacement. He said that in the offseason, and you look at all the advanced data at the time, and it was like, yeah, DiVincenzo's a nice role player, but he's not Emmanuel Quickly. And frankly, DiVincenzo's been better than Quickly this season. And then we had the second conversation around the trade when DiVincenzo was shooting gangbusters. And me and XJ were like, well, how sustainable can this be? You look at the history of shooting, you look at outlier seasons, how can this maintain? And when DiVincenzo's doing something like this, you don't even consider like, hey, maybe this 26-year-old just had a breakthrough with shooting. You don't even consider the human aspect of it. Sometimes when you are into analytics and you're trying to apply them to a sport, you don't even consider the human aspect of something like that. So that's where, someone like you, who I read every single thing you put out, you apply analytics all the time, but you also marry it to the human aspect of basketball. And that's where the human aspect is so important. I think that's going to bring me to our last question about the broader aspect, and this can just
can I just add one thing, because that's a really great point, and I'm glad that comes through, because it's something that I try really hard to do, because I do look at a ton of analytics, and I do watch film, and I do try to have a greater understanding for that stuff, and one of the things that I think that as a reporter, what you really truly have to have in you is you can't take no for an answer. You can't take no for an answer, and you can't ever think that okay, I have it. I have enough. You just kind of have to keep trying to gather as much information as you can from every single different angle that you can possibly get, even when you think you know the answer, even when you're certain, okay, I've got it. Because there might be something else that maybe it contributes to what you already believe. Maybe you're right. Maybe you totally have it, but it's just another interesting perspective, another tidbit of information that if you lose your curiosity about that, then the story is just not going to be as good. So, like, for example, like I had the exact same thought with DiVincenzo about, is he really going to keep shooting like this? Like, is this an extended hot streak, or did he just get way better? And so maybe a month ago or something, I basically asked that question to Donte. And I was like, is this an extended hot streak, or are you way better? And his response was really interesting. And he was like, it's not even that I'm a better shooter, but I'm smarter about my shots. And this was before everybody went down. He started taking, 12 contested 30-foot off the dribble jumpers a game. But he was saying, you look at what I did in Sacramento, and I shot like 36%. And he looks at the analytics. He's aware of all this stuff. He's like, I shot like 36% from three or whatever it was in Sacramento, but I was 40% on catch and shoots. And I just don't feel like I have anything to prove anymore. Like, I know what I am as a player. I've been in the league long enough. I don't feel like I need to prove, oh yeah, I can take guys off the dribble. Oh yeah, I can hit these pull-ups. I don't feel that. I know where I'm really good is I'm really good in the corners, and I'm really good off the catch. And if I can just be really good in the corners and really good off the catch, I'm going to hit shots. And he was like, go look at the ratio. Go see how many more shots are off the catch. Go see how many more shots are from the corners. And you look at it, higher percentage of his threes this season are from the corners than any other year of his career. I think that's still true. And you look at it, and the numbers on the catch are pretty similar to what the numbers were off the catch from, like he said, Sacramento, which was actually an overall down shooting season for him. And he had kind of reproportioned that. Now, over the last month, it's not as true anymore. Now he's taking ridiculously difficult shots, and he's hitting all of them. And it's insane the way that he's playing and the leap that he's made. But sometimes you can think what's going on, and somebody who's closer to it can just give you a better perspective. This was something that I had with Miles McBride too, where I was always of the mind that McBride couldn't shoot. And I would watch him I remember watching him training camp his rookie year. I remember watching him shoot around. And I remember watching one shot where his elbow went out, another shot where his elbow went in, another shot where his elbow went to the side. And I was like, man, there's just no consistency here. This is going to be a problem. And I knew he shot 40 some odd percent at West Virginia, but I was like, he's not going to shoot. And he didn't for 2 years. And when he re-enters the rotation, I'm shocked that the threes are going in. And then you talk to people, and Tibbs talks about, well, over the last year in practice, we've seen a lot more. I talked to McBride about it, and he's like, well, I really started to get consistency with my elbow on the jump shot about a year ago. And then Tibbs says, over the last year, we've actually seen that in practice, when the Knicks track all of their numbers and stuff, the shooting numbers have been really good. And usually that comes for a little bit in practice before you see it on the court. It doesn't just go from not good in practice to good in practice and good on the court. It goes from not good at all to good in practice, and then eventually good when it matters if you make it to that step. And Tibbs was saying for a little bit behind the scenes, like, he is better offensively than you think. And I was like, why? And now it's because they have that stuff behind the scenes. So it's like, if you just don't, you can't just take what you're seeing at face value. You kind of always have to keep asking, okay, why? Okay, so he was good and he started making them in practice. Okay, why did he start making them in practice? Oh, it's because he actually straightened out the elbow stuff that he was working out with. Okay, why did he straighten out the elbow? Talk to McBride about that. And it's like, you just keep going and going and going and going until there's just nothing else to squeeze out of the rag.